So everyone is tracking. Today we'll be going over an introduction to the M16A4 Service Rifle. Now there are technically two classes. The next class, which I'll teach, will be on the nomenclature and assembly and disassembly of the rifle. Today, Killen is going to provide a introduction to it to include how to handle the weapon, how to determine what condition it's in, and how to safely handle it. She's going to go over all that with you today, so pay close attention, particularly because this will be one of the first things you will be tested on candidates.
I forget the exact title of it. I think it was.
So pay attention. If you do have questions, be sure to ask them throughout the brief. So without further ado, Bella, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Captain Devlin. My name is Bella Colleen. As Captain Devlin mentioned, I went to OCS last summer. Unfortunately, I was injured and left in week 5 of the 10-week program, but I'm here to talk to you today about the M16. I am going back to OCS this summer as well. I should mention that. So before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why this is so important. As Captain Devlin mentioned, this is one of the first things that you will be tested on at OCS. And one of the first things that happens after you start training is you are issued an M16 that you will carry with you every day of training until pretty much the very end. And so you're going to have pretty much constant handling of these weapons. And so it's really important that you know about them and basically know what you're continuously holding on to. And additionally, you might have the opportunity, if you like to be an armory candidate, like I was last year at OCS, where you're not only responsible for your own weapon, but the weapons of your entire platoon, whether that is putting the weapons away in your platoon armory at the back of your squad bay, or also you're accountable for the weapons anytime that you're in the classroom. So you actually run ahead of the company and make sure that all of the weapons are put away properly when you're in class as well. So, and one more thing, actually, this is also really important for after you leave OCS. This isn't something that's just applicable there, but as a leader of Marines, it's also really important that you know the capabilities of the M16. Does anyone want to tell me why you think it's so important as an officer of Marines that you would need to know the capabilities of the M16 service rifle? Just speak up. I can't, unfortunately, see the hand raises. All right, well, the reason that this is so important when you're an officer of Marines is that with the M16A4 Service Rifle being the main standard issue service rifle of Marines, this is likely what your Marines are going to be carrying when they're in the field. And so it's important when you're making tactical decisions that you know both the capabilities of the weapon so that you can compare it to the weapons of any enemies that you may face, and also just so that you know the load that your Marines are carrying, how heavy it is, how many rounds they might need, how far they're going to be able to fire from, things like that. So at the beginning of every OCS class, you will go over learning objectives. First, you'll go over your TLOs, or terminal learning objectives. So I'll give you just a moment to read over this. And you'll also have enabling learning objectives. So I'll give you a little bit longer time to read through these.
One other reason to pay attention to these ELOs is this is essentially what you're going to be tested on. So if you take anything away from these classes, it'd be these ELOs.
All right. So before we get into any aspects of the M16 itself, we'll go over the 4 weapon safety rules. And these apply to any weapon that you may encounter anywhere, but especially in your time at OCS or in the Marine Corps. First, treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Anytime that you take charge of a weapon, a rifle, an M16 in any situation, you must be able to treat the weapons as if it were loaded so that you don't risk firing upon anyone that you don't intend to. You can never completely guarantee that you know what condition a weapon is in without checking it. And so anytime you pick up a weapon, you're holding a weapon, without constantly checking it, you should always treat it as if it were loaded. Number two, never point a weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. So as you'll see, all of these weapon safety rules are pretty intertwined, but for similar reasons to, as mentioned above, you don't want to risk something becoming an unintended target. All weapons, including the M16, have inherent risks and can cause, and often cases they're intended to cause death, and you never want that to happen to a target where it's not intended. Number three, keep your third weapon safety rule, keep your fingers straight and off the trigger until you are ready to fire. You never want to fire until you are 100% completely ready. And if you have your finger on the trigger prior to that point, there is the likelihood that you will fire unintentionally. So until you are completely 100% ready, keep your finger straight and off the trigger. And the fourth weapon safety rule, keep your weapon on safe until you intend to fire. Similar to above, if your weapon is not on safe, there is a likelihood that it could go off, and you do not want your weapon to fire or go off until you intend for it to do so. Now we'll talk a little bit more about the characteristics of the M16A4 itself, and an acronym that you can use to describe the M16A4 is LMGAS or LMGAS. And this stands for lightweight, magazine fed, gas operated, air cooled, shoulder fired. Some more information about the M16A4, it takes 5.56 ammunition. It has 2 firing modes, semi-automatic or 3-round burst. And some information on the weight of the rifle. The rifle itself is 7 pounds, 8 ounces. At OCS, you will have the rifle with a sling. So you'll have about 7 3/4 pounds of weight that you're carrying around all the time. And again, if you're thinking about beyond OCS, if you're making tactical decisions, any Marine that's carrying an M16 is going to have 7 3/4 pounds in their hands, plus an additional pound for every full magazine. And if you have the bayonet with scabbard attachment, that is about an additional pound as well. The capabilities of the M16A4. So there are various rates of fire for the M16. For continuous fire, it's about 700 to 900 rounds per minute. For semi-automatic fire, it's about 45 rounds per minute, so a little bit less than 1 a second. Burst is 90 rounds per minute, and then sustained rate of fire is 12 to 15 rounds per minute. There are also ranges associated with the M16A4. The maximum range, so the furthest that a bullet could possibly go when fired from an M16 is approximately 3,600 meters. But the maximum effective range for a point target is about 550 meters. And then for an area target, it's about 800 meters. Next, we'll talk about the cycle of operations. Now, there are 8 steps in the cycle of operations.
Feeding occurs as the round is stripped from the magazine by the bolt.
There's feeding, chambering, locking, firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and cocking. Now, I don't think you guys are going to be able to hear the video, unfortunately, through my microphone, so I will just tell you what's happening as it's happening. So step 1 is feeding. Step 2, chambering. So the bullet goes into the chamber. Step 3, locking. Step 4, firing. Step 5, unlocking. Step 6, extracting. Step 7, ejecting. And step 8, cocking. And I'm being told that you might be able to hear the audio in the video, so let's try it and you guys can let me know if you can hear it.
Feeding occurs as the round is stripped
Can
from
you
the
hear it?
magazine by the bolt. Chambering occurs as the round is pushed
Okay.
into the chamber by the bolt. Locking occurs as the locking lugs on the bolt align with the lugs on the barrel extension. Firing occurs as the propellant ignites within the cartridge case, forcing the projectile out of the barrel. Unlocking occurs as the bolt rotates until the locking lugs no longer align with the lugs on the barrel extension. Extracting occurs as the cartridge case is withdrawn from the chamber by the extractor claw. Ejecting occurs as the cartridge case is expulsed by the ejector and spring. Cocking occurs as the hammer is reset.
Cool. Good to know the audio works. All right. Next, we'll talk about the different types of rounds that are used in the M16. And there are 5 types. The first is the M193 ball. And there's no identifying marking for this ammunition. Next is the M855 ball. This is the primary ammunition that is used in the M16, and it's identified by a green tip. There's the green tip. Next are the M196 and M856 tracers. A tracer is a round that's ignited after it's fired. It's identified by a bright red tip, and it's primarily used for observation firing, incendiary effects, and signaling. Now, for tracer ammunition, you use it interspersed within ball ammunition. And so you want about 1 tracer per every 4 ball ammunition, ideally. And there's the red tip. The M199 dummy round is a fake round for training. It has no propellant in it. It's good for teaching things like weapons cleaning. And it's identified by 6 grooves along the casing. And last is the M200 blank round. It's identified by the crimped tip of the casing as well as the tip being violet. And this is used commonly in military training to stimulate firing. And so at OCS, this is actually the rounds that you'll be given to fire during certain field exercises. Now, ammunition, as mentioned, is placed into a magazine, and there are a couple of different ways that you can fill a magazine. First is hand loading.
Just like it is on the follower. So the pointed end is here, the pointed end of the bullet is here. I'm just going to place it on top and press down, and now it's locked into place. You take your next round and do the same thing on the side of the first one, place it in, line it up, and you press it. And now that's loaded in there as well. You take your following round and you do the same thing, and you do that with as many rounds as your magazine can hold.
So as you can see, hand loading is what you do when you have individual pieces of ammunition, or particularly if you want to load less than a full magazine, which is likely what will occur at OCS. You're often given 4 or 8 rounds, especially early on in OCS, and then maybe we'll get some more towards the end.
Line the bullet up just like it is on the.
There we go. Now, if you have your ammunition in a clip, or are wanting to fill your magazines to a higher capacity, then you also have the opportunity, have the capability to speed load. Now you line up the clip for speed loading, And then you can just push the bullets in. And then you remove the clip. Take some more. Once again, push down. You will not have that at OCS. So next we'll go over the 4 weapons conditions. Condition 1 is the condition that you use when you're closest to firing your weapon. So you have your safety on, magazine inserted, round in chamber, bolt forward, and ejection port cover closed. Condition 2 does not apply to the M16. It applies more to pistols. Now, condition 3, you have your safety on, magazine inserted, but the chamber is empty. The bolt is forward and the ejection port cover is closed. Now, condition 4, which is the condition that your weapon will be in at most times at OCS, is safety on, magazine removed, chamber empty, bolt forward, ejection port cover closed. So can someone tell me what things stay the same across these 4 conditions?
Safety on. Oh.
Definitely safety on. What else?
Ejection port covered, closed.
Yep. And one more.
Bolt forward.
Yep. Those are the 3. So regardless of the condition that your weapon is in, your safety should always be on. As we talked about, that gets back to the weapon safety rules. But your bolt should also be forward and ejection port cover closed. Now, there are going to be times when your bolt needs to be locked to the rear and the ejection port cover open. And this will make more sense when Captain Devlin tells you a little bit more about the specific pieces of the M16. But when you are transferring a weapon from one person to another and you need to show that the weapon is clear, which we'll talk about, I think, a little bit more later, you will need to lock the bolt to the rear and keep the ejection port cover open so that you can see into the chamber and show that the weapon is clear. But then to return the weapon to condition 4, you need to make sure that you send the bolt forward and then close the ejection port cover. So to determine a weapon's condition, whenever you come across an unmanned weapon, you must safely determine the condition of that weapon and then make it safe if it is not. So first, point the muzzle in a safe direction. Again, this gets back to our weapon safety rules. Especially in a case where you come across a weapon and you don't know the condition, it is most important that you point it in a safe direction. So next, you'll attempt to put the weapon on safe. Note that the weapon will not switch to safe if it is not cocked. Next, remove the magazine, so any additional ammunition. Fourth, lock the bolt to the rear. So again, when Captain Devlin goes over the specifics of the M16, you'll see how you would lock the bolt to the rear. And as I was mentioning, this is how you show the weapon is clear. As 5th step, visually inspect the chamber to ensure that no ammo is present. Do not physically interact with the chamber. Simply look into the chamber and see if you see any ammunition. Place the weapon on safe. You should be able to do so now, and then allow the bolt to go forward. Then move the firing selector to semi and squeeze the trigger. Pull the charging handle fully rearward and release, this time allowing the bolt to return to forward, and then place the weapon on safe. So through doing these steps, you have inspected to make sure there is no ammunition present. You have removed any ammunition that maybe was present, especially by the removal of the magazine. And then you have placed the weapon on safe, putting the weapon back into condition 4. well, close the ejection port cover. There we go. Now, there are various commands that are associated with any weapons that you may use. First is to load. So this is the command to take a weapon from condition 4 to condition 3. Now, I know we don't have the conditions on the screen anymore, but can anyone tell me what it means to take the weapon from condition 4 to condition 3?
Add the
Burn the magazine.
Yeah, put in the magazine. And then the next command is make ready. And so this is the command to take a weapon from condition 3 to condition 1. So what do you do in this case?
Chamber around.
Yes, chamber around. Next command is to fire. And so this is when you may engage with targets. Now again, weapon safety rules still apply here. And so even though you've had the command to fire, make sure that you intend to fire and are prepared to fire before removing your weapon from safe. Cease fire is the command used to halt fire. So you must immediately stop firing. That doesn't mean until you think you have eliminated a target, anything like that. That means immediately stop, no more rounds. Unload is the command to take the weapon back down to condition 4. So if you were taking the weapon from condition 1 to condition 4, how would you get it back down?
Remove the magazine?
Yeah, remove the magazine. And then one more step.
Clear the chamber.
Yeah, clear the chamber. And then unload and show clear is when you both unload the weapon, but then you also show clear, like I mentioned, move the bolt to the rear, open the ejection port cover, show that there is no ammunition in the chamber, and then return your weapon to condition 4. Next, we'll go over some weapons carries. The first weapons carry is tactical. So you use this when there is no immediate threat present, but it allows for controlled movement. So there's a quick transition to engagement. The weapon is still positioned in a way that you could easily fire if necessary, but there's no immediate threat. Next is alert, or as it says here, and as you often say at OCS, alert to the dirt. So enemy contact is likely. There is a faster transition to a firing position. However, it's more fatiguing than a tactical carry. So it takes a lot of effort in your arms. As we mentioned, this is basically 8 pounds that you're carrying. It takes a fair amount of fatigue into your arms to carry it like this for an extended period of time. And it's called alert to the dirt because the muzzle is pointing at the ground or the dirt. Ready. So ready is when enemy contact is imminent. And this is when you are prepared to fire the weapon. And so now you can see why it's so easy to get from alert to the dirt to ready is all you have to do is lift the muzzle of the gun up and then place the stock into your shoulder. However, this is very tiring to maintain over a period of time. As you can see from the picture, particularly your non-dominant arm is extended quite far out to hold up the weapon. And so this is only used when you are preparing for enemy contact. Now for transporting your weapon. This is when you have your weapon on your sling and are just in transit without an expectation of needing to use the weapon quickly. So this enables you to move quicker. It's less fatiguing. That's what the sling is for. The sling is to help you carry the weapon. And then this is strong side sling arms, which means that you're carrying the weapon on your dominant side. So for me, that would be my right side. We also call this strong side muzzle up because the muzzle faces towards the sky. Next is weak side sling arms or weak side muzzle down. This is used for transit as well, but it's used for transit in inclement weather because it keeps moisture from entering the rifle. You want to keep your rifle clean, serviceable, ready to fire. Moisture can cause problems with that. And so if it's raining, seems like it's going to rain, you'll carry on your weak side. So again, for me, this would be my left, and you'll carry it muzzle down. Now, crossbody sling arms is best for when you need both of your hands. It is most difficult of all these carries to get your weapon in this position. And it takes some time to get it out of this position. But if you need both of your hands, but you also need to have your weapon on you, this is a great way to carry it because it's completely out of your way, your hands are clear, and you can have your muzzle in either direction, though down is usually preferred because it keeps the muzzle from pointing in an unsafe direction. And also, as you can see in the picture, when you have the muzzle up, it is right up against the back of your head. And so it can be a little bit more comfortable and more maneuverable to have the muzzle pointing towards the ground. And that's all we have. What questions do you have for me? Or Captain Devlin, I'm sure that he can also answer questions for you if there's something I can't answer.
What is the difference between the two types of ball rounds?
That's a good question. Captain Devlin, do you know the answer to that one?
Yeah, so the difference is essentially the thickness of the metal coating on the outside. So the newer ball round that we use with the green tip has better penetration. So when you see anyone using like an AR-15 in the civilian sector, they're using the unmarked round, less penetration capability.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any significant differences being left-handed at OCS in terms of handling the weapons?
I believe you can handle the weapon as a lefty. They'll let you do that. I don't know if there are any hindrances to you. I'm right-handed, as I mentioned.
You just have to watch out for casings.
One of the things you'll need to be careful of, Jack, is that when the brass gets ejected from the rifle, it's coming out on the right side. So since you'd be holding in your left hand, just being aware that the brass comes out on that side.
Right, thank you.
One other thing I wanted to mention real quick that I didn't mention explicitly is somewhat how the weapons safety test is going to go. So as Captain Devlin mentioned, this is one of the first things that you're tested on at OCS, because since you're going to be carrying these weapons and even firing these weapons, though it is a blank, in field environments, one of the first things that you do is a practical weapons handling test. Now, you also will have some written questions about more of the facts of the M16, like the weight, the range, things like that I mentioned, but they will actually have you go out on the parade deck and you'll have to show them and maneuver your weapon between the different carries that we talked about, both the sling carries and the tactical carry. And then you'll also need to be able to state verbatim the 4 weapon safety rules, the 4 weapons conditions, and you'll need to also just generally show safe weapons handling throughout it. So one of the things that people need to make sure of at OCS is that when you're taking a weapon in between these different positions, that you're always still following the weapon safety rules. It's kind of unwritten. It's not one of those things that's like checking a box on the exam, but if at any point you flag someone, which is that where you point the muzzle of the gun at them, or just in any way don't pay attention to the weapon safety rules, they can fail you for that. Any other questions?
All right, thank you, Bella. So last chance for questions. This is important stuff. I know going from weapons carries and transitioning between them actually handling the M16 we can't do right now. You'll get time to practice at officer candidate school before your test, but keep in mind you only get a little limited time. So at least knowing what these carries look like, what they're called, what the basics of the M16 now, when you encounter it at OCS, you'll be much more prepared. So that's the intent of this class, to give you a introductory familiarization with what you're going to encounter at OCS so that you can learn quicker, be more confident when you actually take the exams. All right, if no one else has any other questions, the next class will go Monday at 1600. I'll be teaching that one. It's going to be a continuation of the M16. We're going to break down the nomenclature and how to maintain your M16. So if there are no questions, I will see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend and stay safe. Hoorah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bella.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Hoorah.